Well, hey there, and welcome to Unmistakably You. Happy Wednesday. I hope you are enjoying being midway through your week. And thank you for joining us as always. I'm Amy from Unmistakably You. I'm a wedding planner and an educator here in London, Ontario. If you are here for the first time, welcome. We go live every Wednesday night and we try to help you navigate your wedding and keep your sanity. If you are joining us on the replay, hello. Nice to see you here catching up. I know that life is busy and we appreciate you spending your time with us. Your wedding is probably, to this point, one of the most important days of your life. And we are here to try to help you to navigate the planning of the wedding with some grace and, like I said, with some sanity. So we've decided that as it's a new year and we know some of you likely got engaged over the holidays, we thought it would be appropriate to launch a series for January and February called Setting You Up for Success. So if you are one of those newly engaged couples, congratulations, what an exciting time in your life. And you're probably finding that all of the things get overwhelming pretty fast. There's a lot to think about when you're planning a wedding and when you're newly engaged. And so it's a very exciting time, but it can also be overwhelming, which is why we're popping in here with our Setting You Up for Success series to help navigate you through that. So we're going to kind of do things in order. We talked last week about the 4 things that you need to have in place before you start booking any vendors. And so if you missed that, you can catch the replay. It is in our media section here on the Facebook page. It's also on our YouTube channel. So if you want to pop over to Unmistakably You on YouTube, you can find it there as well. And so we talked about making sure that you have your priorities straight with your partner, setting your guest list, setting your budget, and determining your planning schedule. And now we're going to launch into some of those things that you're going to be booking kind of in the order that you'll likely look at them in. So today we wanted to talk about booking your venue and catering, because those are big items that will largely determine the shape, structure, and complexion of your wedding. Now, there's like literally a billion things that I could talk about here. I'm going to try to be concise. I'm going to try and, control my verbosity and my inclination to just continue talking. But I do invite you, if I say something that brings up a question or a comment, I invite you to plug a message into the chat. If you have a question, I'm more than happy to answer it. That's why I'm doing this live instead of pre-recorded. So feel free to even just say hi so that I don't feel like I'm talking into the void and not ever interacting with humans. But booking your venue and catering are a big deal. And so I'm going to try and break it down into a couple of just the really important points to highlight. If you want more detail, again, pop on over to our YouTube channel. We have a playlist over there called Venues, where I do have some videos that go into a lot more detail about different styles of venues and things that you might want to think about when you're booking those different styles of venues. So first and foremost, if you're starting to look at venues, you need to make sure that you and your partner have had those conversations that I talked about last week. Make sure you're on the same page with your priorities. Make sure you've determined the style of wedding that you want to have, the number of guests, and the budget, because those are things that are going to be dramatically impacted by your venue choice. So first and foremost, do your homework before you just jump right into those exciting venue tours. The second thing I wanted to mention is that there are basically 3 types of venues, and I won't go into huge amounts of detail here. I do have a video on the YouTube channel about that. But the first is an all-inclusive venue. And so these are venues like golf courses, hotels, event facilities that provide everything, that have in-house catering and bartending, that often provide other services in their packages, like maybe including officiants or DJs or floral and decor. There's usually some kind of an on-site coordinator or facilitator or maitre d' of some kind. And so these these kinds of venues definitely have some benefits. They're going to involve fewer moving pieces on your end, particularly if those venues do provide in-house services, or if they have recommended vendor lists. That can take a lot of the guesswork off of your plate. Some of the drawbacks, though, are that all-inclusive venues tend to be perhaps a little bit more pricey and a little bit less flexible in terms of their packages sometimes. So all-inclusive venues are definitely appealing for certain styles of weddings and certain types of budgets, but you may find if you're a little bit more budget conscious, you might lean more towards a semi-inclusive venue, and that is a term that I 100% made up. That is not a thing. Like if you Google semi-inclusive venues, I don't know what you'll find, but this is just kind of the way that it works in my brain and the way that I categorize things. A semi-inclusive venue is a venue that provides slightly more service than a DIY venue, but not as much service as an all-inclusive venue. So it's a little harder to pin down. It's a little bit less certain, but these might be places like halls or maybe sometimes barns or facilities that will allow you to bring in more of your own vendors. So oftentimes this boils down to catering and bartending. Those tend to be your biggest ticket items. So oftentimes these halls will allow you some control over the catering and the bartending, but they'll provide some services like tables and chairs, lighting, washrooms, those amenities that you don't necessarily think of as perks until you're looking at wedding venues going, oh, there's no washroom here and we're going to have to bring in a washroom trailer. So the benefits to semi-inclusive are those budget savings, a little bit more flexibility in terms of the kind of catering and bartending you want to bring in. Usually these kinds of venues are the kinds of venues that do weddings often, so they may be able to provide a little bit more guidance as you navigate the journey. But the drawbacks are that there are more more vendors for you to coordinate, and sometimes because these venues tend to be a little bit more affordable, sometimes, and not always, I'm not painting with broad strokes here. I'm just saying sometimes they're not as well maintained as other venues just because they're at a lower price point. Then the third kind of venue is going to be what I call a DIY venue. And this is any kind of barn, backyard, tent, anytime you're kind of creating a venue out of thin air. And so there are benefits to this, absolutely. You can have a really personal venue where you bring in everything and you create a venue to your vision out of thin air. The drawbacks, you have to create a venue, and that's a lot of work. So if you're thinking about a tent or a barn or like cleaning out the old drive shed, just keep in mind that you have to bring in everything. Every vendor, every service needs to be brought in. And sometimes that even means rewiring electrical panels and retrofitting things. And, it can be sometimes costlier than you think. You don't have venue fees, but those rentals, the cost of bringing everything in and putting it all together can be higher than you think. So 3 kinds of venues: all-inclusive, semi-inclusive, and DIY. I'm going to try to sort of generically cover some of the things that you're going to need to think about at all of those venues. Again, pop on over to the YouTube channel. I have videos on all 3 different styles of venues. If you're leaning towards a semi-inclusive venue, there's more detailed video over on YouTube about that as well. But generally speaking, if you're looking at venues, the first thing you want to do is look at reviews. Check the reviews. Keep in mind that the people who are most inclined to write reviews are the people that are either really happy or really pissed off. So take the negative reviews with a grain of salt. But if there are a billion negative reviews, that's when you really do need to get concerned. So check the reviews, ask people their opinions. If you happen to be looking at services simultaneously, like maybe you're checking venues at the same time as you're looking at photographers, ask the photographer if they've shot at a couple of different venues that you're looking at and ask for their opinions about it. Search out those Facebook groups and find people who've gotten married at the venue that you're considering and ask what their experience was. Lots of ways aside from just going to Google to check the reviews. You'll want to think about, regardless of style of venue, the logistics and the location. Pardon me. Excuse me. Does it fit your vision? Can you see yourself getting married there? Think about things like the space. Is it adequate for your guest count? Does it provide the amenities that you want? How much work are you going to have to do on the wedding day and the days before and after? Do they provide a concierge or a planner of some kind? How much work are you going to have to do on the days before and after? If it's a DIY venue, chances are pretty good that you're going to have to do a lot of setup on the day before and after. Is it available on the day before and after? Or do you literally have to find a way to bring everything in that day and get it out at the end of the night? Is the venue convenient for yourself and your guests to access? Keep in mind that you'll probably have to make a couple of trips there. So for planning purposes, is it convenient for you? And for guests who are perhaps traveling, if there are out of town guests, are there hotel amenities? Are there B&Bs locally? So thinking about accessibility for planning and for attending of your guests. What's the parking situation? That's something else to consider. There's an awesome venue here in town that's beautiful, but the parking is down the hill and around the corner from the venue. And so that might create problems depending on your guest demographic. Maybe you have a lot of elderly guests and that's not appropriate for them. What hours can you access the space for setup and tear down? What time does the bar close? These might be factors that influence your decision. Will there be other weddings on site that day? Sometimes big halls or hotels host multiple weddings, and is that a problem for you? Are you concerned about running into another couple on the day of your wedding? So think about the logistics and the location. Then I want you to think about guest comfort and experience. So is it accessible for guests with mobility issues? Like I said, is the parking prohibitive? Are there ramps? Are there a ton of stairs? Are the bathrooms in the basement? And that's the only way to access them. It's down the stairs. If you have a lot of elderly guests, that might be a concern. Think about the temperature and the weather, depending on the season that your wedding is taking place in. If there's any kind of outdoor component, what if it's hot? What if it's cold? What if it rains? What are the rain plans? Who implements the rain plans? Think about the food and beverage, because this is one thing that your guests will absolutely remember. I hate to break it to you. Nobody is going to, in 10 years, say, "Oh, did you see the ranunculus in her bouquet?" Like, okay, maybe a couple of people will, but realistically, they're going to remember if the prime rib is cold, or if the vegetables are mushy, or if the bar was, light on the booze. Whatever it is that's important to your guests, you want to make sure you check, because they're going to remember the food and beverage, because that's the most dominant part of their experience. And I know that the napkin fold means a lot to you, but realistically, it's more about the food and bev for the guests. Think about whether there are restrictions and requirements that the venue has. So do they have recommended vendors? Do they have required vendors? If you're bringing in your own vendors, is there a surcharge? Like if you hire a DJ who's not on their preferred list, are they going to charge you extra because that DJ is not as familiar with their venue? Are there decor restrictions? Open flame is a big one. A lot of places are really cracking down because fire marshals are cracking down and saying you can't have open flame. So there are often restrictions as to whether you can even have real candles, what they need to be enclosed in if you're allowed to have them. Is there adequate power available, particularly if you're thinking about bringing in a live band, or if you do have to bring in a washroom trailer, if you're bringing in a lot of lighting, even coffee urns. It's one of those ridiculous things that you would never think. But if your caterer is brewing coffee on site, you need to think about the power situation. I run into this oftentimes with tent and barn weddings where the power isn't sufficient for a coffee urn. They plug it in and everything goes down and the music goes dead and there's no mic and the speeches are silent and it's bad news. So you need to think about these things. You'll also want to think about fees and payments. If you get to the point where you're seriously considering booking, figure out if there are any added fees. Are there gratuities? Are there venue charges? Are there any additions to that package price? What's the payment schedule? How much is the deposit? Is that deposit refundable? What happens if you cancel? What happens if you have to postpone? This was a thing that happened frequently during COVID, the postponements and cancellations, but also, is your deposit transferable? So will that venue, if for whatever reason, God forbid, you have to cancel your wedding, can you find another couple to essentially buy your deposit? This is something that you may want to be proactive and ask in advance. You also want to know how the payments are taken. Do you need to have a certified check or a bank draft, or can you give them a credit card or cash, or do they take an email transfer? Think about these kinds of things. Now, those four, no, I can't count 5 things. Check the reviews. Logistics and location, guest comfort and experience, restrictions and requirements, and fees and payments. Those are things that apply to all venues. But I just want to talk briefly specifically about semi-inclusive and DIY venues, because those tend to be the ones where you're responsible for more elements. And so some of the things you need to think about are, how much do you need to do yourself? Is there someone who will manage things on the day, or do you need to hire like a wedding planner, for instance? Maybe you need a day of coordinator. Maybe you need more of a full service planner, depending on how involved you want to be in the lead up to the wedding day, but particularly on the day itself. You probably don't want to have your fingers in all the pies on the actual wedding day. You don't want to be sending mom to set up the place cards when she should be helping you into your dress. You don't want to be sending your maid of honor to go find you a new DJ if your DJ breaks his leg. So think about what the venue provides and what you're comfortable with on the day of, and then that will hopefully lead you to other professional planners if needed. Contact me if you need help. How many vendors do you have to bring in? How many moving pieces of that puzzle are there? Do you have to coordinate rentals? This is a big one, particularly if you're doing a private property wedding or a barn or a tent or something like that. If you have to coordinate all the rentals, particularly for dinner service, that's a big job. Sometimes caterers and bartenders will assist or take that over for you, but how much of that do you need to do? If you're thinking about a tent, you need to talk to the tent company about the space required. It's not just the space of the footprint of the actual tent, but you've got the tent pegs and the guy wires that are holding it down. Sometimes if it's on a hard surface, you might have weighted water barrels that require space. There are limitations with tents. You can't put a tent on a septic tank or on a weeping bed if you happen to be on private property out in the country. What are the permit requirements? Some townships have different requirements, but in most cases, if your tent is over a certain size, you're going to need a building permit. Who gets that permit? Is it the tent company or is it you? You need to talk to your tent company about when it's going to be put up and when it's going to be taken down. So all of these are things that play into DIY private property weddings that you'll need to think about before you commit to doing that tented wedding of your dreams. Think about all of those moving pieces and whether or not you really have the energy and the desire to coordinate them yourself. Now, just a brief word about catering. I'm keeping an eye on my time here, and I could probably talk for another hour about this, but I won't, I promise. Again, if you're hiring a separate caterer, this is often going to be at a semi-inclusive or a DIY venue. Check the reviews. Please, please, please check the reviews. Ask other people for their experiences. That's going to give you really valuable information, because if you sit down with a caterer, they're going to tell you only the best stories and only share the most glowing reviews. So you need to have a well-rounded picture. Check those reviews. Sit down, like I said, and talk about options with the caterer. How flexible are they? How accommodating are they? If you have specific requests, if you want grandma's mac and cheese served, will they make grandma's recipe? If you want a particular, maybe cultural or, food from your family's history or tradition brought in, is that something that they will accommodate? What services do they provide? Will they set your tables? Will they coordinate those rentals? Do they provide late night food? Will they also bartend? These are things that, depending on your venue, you're going to need to know. How much service staff they bring is usually directly tied to the services that they provide. It varies wildly. Food trucks are a super fun option, for instance, to have at your wedding. But the thing with a food truck is that usually, unless you've negotiated with them, they're going to provide the truck and a cook and an order taker person, whatever the formal term for that is. They're not going to provide staff to set your tables or to bus your tables. So think about the fact that your guests will have just eaten this delicious food truck meal, and they're going to have a takeout boat or a plate or utensils. And what do they do with them? Who clears those? So think about the services that they provide and whether or not you might have to supplement that staff with other people to clear tables. More upscale caterers are going to provide lots more service. They're going to provide the service staff to set the tables, to clear the tables, to make sure that there's someone there at the end of the night to take away those linens and to make sure that the rentals are packed up properly. You want to talk about the kind of service that the caterer provides, is comfortable providing, and is able to provide. And those aren't necessarily the same thing. It will often depend on your venue as to whether a caterer can provide a plated meal or whether they're limited to just a buffet style meal. If that's not important to you, it's maybe not a determining factor in your caterer. But if you want to have that, white glove upscale plated service, you need to have facilities or have a caterer bring in facilities to be able to plate that food, keep it hot, and get it to your guests. So a lot of times, if you're in a DIY venue, at least locally here, you'll end up with a buffet style meal. Again, depending on your caterer. There are lots of caterers who provide upscale meals in the middle of nowhere, and it's incredible. I don't know how they do it. Keep in mind, like I say, there's upscale caterers, there are more affordable caterers. You get what you pay for, really. There are a ton of affordable caterers around who really do provide very good food, but the money savings has to come in somewhere, and usually that's in the services provided. So be mindful of whether that caterer is going to show up, serve your meal, and then leave, or whether they're going to only clear the things that they provide. So if that caterer has provided china and flatware, for instance, they're only going to clear the china and flatware. You're going to have to rent glassware if you want wine and water glasses on your table, and they're not going to clear those. So are you going to leave them on the table all night? What about linen napkins? If you provide linen napkins that the caterer hasn't provided, they're going to leave those on the table, and then you have messy tables all night. So think about the fact that you do get what you pay for, and the savings in cost is usually made up somewhere else. And so think about the kind of experience that provides for both you and for your guests. Like I said, I could probably talk for hours, but I am going to cut it short there. There are so many factors that play into your choice of venue and catering, and I'm more than happy to chat about them with you. So if you have questions or thoughts that you want to plug into the comments, I will answer them later. If you want to give me an email, amy@unmistakablyou.com, I'm more than happy to chat through any of this kind of stuff with you. And like I mentioned, we do have a venue playlist over on our YouTube channel, so feel free to check that out for more in-depth chats about the 3 different styles of venues and things to think about when you're doing venue site visits and all of that good stuff. Next week, I invite you to join me here where we're talking about booking photography and videography, because that is often the next step that many people take following booking their venue and solidifying their date. It's also really exciting because that's how you preserve those memories of your day. So we look forward to seeing you here next Wednesday to talk about photography and videography and how to book those vendors. And finally, I just want to leave you with the reminder that over at unmistakablyou.com, our spring workshops are live. They are filling fast. So pop on over to unmistakablyou.com if you're interested in getting a few more hands-on, one-on-one pointers for how to build a budget that is actually realistic, that's actually going to help you to navigate the wedding plans in more of an educated and prepared way. pop on over there if you want to learn more about how to DIY your coordination of your day. So you want to set up your itinerary in a way that flows smoothly, but you don't have or can't work into the budget a coordinator. We're going to teach you how to create an itinerary that flows smoothly. We've got an awesome vow writing workshop. If you and your partner are looking to write your own vows, Jody from Something New Officiant is going to join us and talk you through how to write meaningful vows that will have all of your guests in tears. And we've also got an awesome first dance workshop with Clara from See You Move. And so it's not a choreographed dance lesson, but it's a way to just kind of learn a few moves, how to put them into practice, how to hold your partner, and how to be comfortable on the dance floor during that first dance. So those awesome workshops are live on our website over at unmistakably.you.com. Pop on over there because they are selling fast and I don't want you to miss your opportunity. So until next Wednesday, happy planning, take care, and I'll see ya.